underneath it all, there's Marcel Brunnel, the person, scout leader. You know, I have a passion for working with kids. So when you told me that, I'm like, I like who this guy is. You know, we're instrumental in helping the, you know, planting the trees. You came up with an idea, and then it went national, and all of a sudden the worldwide is a tree planting thing. I was always impressed about that. But you know, you've been adding to the tax base of Whitby yourself.
Sure, my 21 grandkids, yeah.
Why do you do this, Marcel? I mean, honestly, you're putting yourself in the line of fire. Surely to God you could be fishing somewhere.
I love it. I love it. I tell you what I love. I love, my father was a councillor in Ajax. It's where I got it from. And he battled the forces of power and deception that existed at that time in Ajax. And I left town because everybody, and my father had finally decided he was getting out of it, he'd fought it long enough. And I had a young family, and everybody was after me. Oh, you're going to follow your dad. You know, you're going to run, you're going to run. I said, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I don't need this nonsense. And so I got the hell out of town, and I came to Whitby to get away from it. Well, I was in Whitby for quite a while, and my neighbors discovered that I had a political background. I was heavily involved in scouting at the time. As I did a Cub Master, a Scout Master, Rover Skip. I was involved with hockey and soccer, and I was involved with all kinds of stuff. I was out in the community, and my neighbors decided that, hey, they got this guy that has a political background and can represent us, and they held a neighborhood meeting in somebody's house, and
they said, you're in.
Invited me down for just to have a conversation with this guy. And I went down, there was all these cars on the street, and I walked in, and man, they had this petition all signed, and then you had to have 10 signatures. Mm-hmm. They must have had 50 signatures, and I was running. It didn't matter what. I said no. I said no about 5 or 10 times. I watched all what my father had gone through, and so I wasn't really anxious to get into it. And of course, when I get into it and had the support of my neighbors, I mean, they're working like crazy to get you elected, so you got to really respect that. And so I did, and I worked hard. I knocked on every door 3 times. In those days, I had really good legs. I ran from door to door to door to door to door. And people would say, you were just here, you know, not so long ago. What are you doing here again? I said, well, I'm going around again. That was a Center Ward. And I got elected a Center Ward councillor, and Barry Evans, who was the councillor at the time, he was a lawyer, and had every reason to believe he was going to get back in. He was a bright guy and a capable councillor, and he lost. And he was pretty shook up by it. And he invited me over to his house, and we had a conversation. And he says, you know what? He said, I couldn't believe how somebody that nobody ever heard of before all of a sudden comes on the scene and gets elected. And he says, and I'm sitting out here watching. I got to admire you, Marcel. He came back later on, much, much later, not that many years ago. I met him as he was going into the courthouse where the regional headquarters used to be. And he said to me, Marcel, I want to thank you for beating me. And I said, why? And he says, you know what? Instead of fooling around in politics, he says, I'm out here making big money. He says, I'm doing really well. He says, you know what? He says, and when I tell people that I was beaten by Marcel Brunnel, everybody says, well, of course. So I don't feel bad, because it's like the giant beat me. You know?
Right.
Of course, I was this little guy nobody ever heard of when I first started, and so it felt good to make that. Finally close that door with Barry, because he was a great guy. He was a great guy. He was a good counselor. Unfortunately, you know, as I told you, I had no umbrage with him. I just had my neighbors who wanted to be elected. So
you got elected.
Yeah, and you know what? I've loved the process. I love the process of being supported by people like Ira and others who work so hard in my campaigns. I work as much for them as I work for any particular reasons of my own. I want them to always feel that they're glad they got me there because I represent their point of view. I represent an openness, and I'm always willing to answer any questions about anything.